Hey everyone, so something a little bit different today. I want to be able to put out more consistent and digestible pieces of content for you guys. So on that note, welcome to the new series on this channel, Chunks to Challenger. In this series, I'm going to be covering little chunks of the game from the moment that you spawn in until the Nexus explodes. And the idea is, if you master these chunks and you consistently execute on them, you will be a Challenger level player. These chunks are going to consist of in-game decisions only, so for anything else out of game in terms of champ pool, mentality, etc., all of my other content can help provide the relevant information on that front. So today's chunk is all about trinket choice, the first decision you will be making in-game. Let's get into it. Optimizing the selection and the use of your trinket is something that I don't see very often. Let's just start getting into some examples. So here, this is a student of mine playing Rakan. And what happens is he decides to go Trinket first, and then run towards bot mid bush, drop that ward there, base for sweeper, and then we'll see if this ward will meaningfully provide anything. And then we'll talk about what might be the better option. And so we have vision of mid bush, and then there is no contesting of mid bush, and it doesn't really achieve anything. So when we would want to ward mid bush is when there is going to be meaningful contesting of the mid bush. Let's say we are a Nautilus versus a Leona, and there is going to be a clashing of heads and vying for control of this mid bush, and having information that they are going to walk in, and then for you to be able to flush them out, that is when it's going to be valuable to actually have vision of this bush. Now, it's great that we have sweeper. It's just the question of, where do we ward level 1 until we base and come back with sweeper, or should we just actively start out sweeper? And so a lot of the times on Rakan, you're going to need to concede level 1 because he is weak early, and so we can have a think about where else we can place our sweeper. I want you guys to just take a second now, think about any other place that we could ward on the map that might be a little bit more valuable than just running warding mid bush and going sweeper if we're against a lane like a Enchanter, a Soraka, who is not going to contest for mid bush, who is going to stand out in the lane and look to shove us in. And hopefully you guys landed on warding around the enemy jungle. Sometimes it's going to be necessary to ward around the river, but let's just first talk about warding the enemy jungle. And what I would want to do is to get a ward around the enemy chickens camp. This is going to provide fantastic information to my team. Maybe the enemy jungle starts on the chickens, and then you can see which way he paths, and then we can have a lot of useful information from that. Maybe the enemy jungle starts red, and then he shows on the chickens, and then we can see where he paths from there. Maybe he starts on topside, and then we don't see the chickens camp being taken at all, and then we can infer that he is starting topside. Just a lot of very valuable information. Another hypothetical, maybe we are versus a Kindred, or we're versus a Graves, or we're versus a Nidalee, and our jungle is very susceptible to getting invaded. Maybe we have an Eve, or a Fiddlesticks, or a Hecarim, and so then we want to ward the river so that we can see the enemy jungle's attempts to counter-invade. We can get creative here. I'm sure you guys can come up with some solutions as well. I just don't want to see autopiloting, piloting straight bot, dropping a ward here. Moving on to the next game, and this is the same student just a session later when he had a chance to implement what I was telling him about. And so what's going to happen is we are going to invest our ward around the enemy chickens. And so we group up with the team, and this is also really good to be able to invade with your team sometimes. We will talk about this in another chunk in terms of invading and posturing around level 1. But we get the ward down here. There's going to be a bit of a fight. That's not important. We eventually get the trinket down. Cool. And then we're going to have some great information. Let's just see what this ward tells us, or rather what the enemy not showing on this ward tells us. And so we know that the enemy jungle is not starting on red and clearing down, because he just never shows here. And there's no way that he's just going to do red Krugs and base or something. That just doesn't really exist. We also have information that the enemy jungle isn't doing something like blue straight to red. So he's most likely committing to a full clear. And let's have a quick look at what's happening bot and why we don't necessarily need vision of the mid bush or of bushes in this lane. If an Enchanter, especially a weak Enchanter early like Janna, is trying to pressure around bushes, you can just force her off. You can push her out. You don't need vision of it. You can just brute force control the bushes yourself. Okay, this game is going to be a great example for you guys to have a look at. And so this is a different student. We're playing Thresh here, and we're versus Leona, and so we might expect a meaningful contest of mid-bush in an isolated 2v2 lane here. We would want to ensure that we get mid-bush control here. So we would ward, base, come sweeper, and the reason that we really want to base for sweeper is for 2 reasons. The first is that this cooldown of sweeper is going to be very low, just with how the interaction between swapping trinkets and the cooldown transferring between them works, and so that we can pressure from fog. Because if we are playing these pressuring champions, if we're playing engagers, if we're playing these playmakers, we want to be able to pressure from fog. Because if someone wards a bush and we don't have sweeper, then we can't pressure appropriately. And so we have an idea of what we want to do in the isolated 2v2 sense. Now what's going to happen in this game is there is going to be an invade. And so we start Trinket, and then we kind of get pulled into this invade, this level 1 posturing, whatever, and then we are not going to have sweeper for the lane. And so I'm just going to speed it up a little bit here. We get to lane, and we don't have sweeper, and we can't ensure fog, so we can't pressure appropriately. So what should happen? If your team is planning to invade level 1, you need to make sure that you can simultaneously provide to the level 1 shenanigans and that you can have sweeper for lane. And so the solution is pretty simple. You just start sweeper. That's it. That's going to be the most reliable solution. Start sweeper. It doesn't matter how long this level 1 posturing and invading extends for. You're going to have your sweeper. You're not going to use it randomly around here. You come back to lane. You have it up. Great. The other higher risk alternative is that you start Trinket, you invade, you get your ward out somewhere, and then you base. You need to base at around 50 seconds so that you can get your sweeper and come back to lane in time. Okay, next game, and this is one of my games. I am playing the Karma here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to just actively start sweeper. And the reason for me just starting sweeper is because I want to start in lane level 1. Karma is very strong. Level 1, I really want to start in lane and get a significant amount of poke while they are trying to enter the lane. And the only way that I can ensure that I start in lane and they don't have any information of me being in lane is if I run to lane level 1 and have sweeper. If I look to use my Trinket early on and then base for sweeper, what if they do the same? And then my sweeper isn't up for the start of the lane. Because a lot of the times what's going to happen, especially at higher elos, is players are going to recognize that Karma is really strong level 1 and they want to ensure that Karma doesn't just get absolute control of the lane at the start, and then they're going to bring 5 down here and they're going to contest, especially if they have a comp like this. You know, Olaf very strong level 1, Pantheon, Israel, Morgana. And so let's just see what happens. I run to lane, I have pinged my team, I have started sweeper, and then I'm going to start in lane, and then I'm telling my Jhin what I want to have happen. And then we're going to sit here, and I know that we're not in vision at all because I didn't see any ward being placed here, and I didn't see anyone over here either. And then we get a big chunk on the enemy ADC as he walks into lane. Job done. Okay, next example, and this is one of my games again. I am the Janna here. And so I'm an Enchanter, and I'm versus an Enchanter, and I'm not expecting there to be much volatility in the 2v2 lane. So I have some options. I can either save my ward for the classic War of Attrition ward after the second wave to deter ganks. Or since I'm Janna, I can try and ward somewhere base for sweeper and then have sweeper to have some fog in the lane so that I can channel my Q up. This is quite specific for Janna as opposed to other enchanters. Or I could even invade and then not even base and go sweeper so that I can have my Trinket up eventually again so that I can ward for the ganks. At the end of the day, in this example, there is less pressure for me to secure bot control because the matchup is not volatile. Let's have a quick look at what happens. I decide to start Trinket. I decide to call an invade with my team because the enemy team might spread around here and my channeling my Q could do a lot of damage in that regard. It turns out that the enemy team kind of invades as well, and so I just invest my wards on the red here. Maybe we can catch someone out here, but again, I don't really have any grand plans with my Trinket for the 2v2 lane, so I'm happy to just get some information of the enemy jungle, where he's going to start, and it's not going to impact the 2v2 outcome too much. And so let's see what happens. They sweep. We know that Hecarim is starting red. Great. Now, the other thing why I'm not too stressed about keeping my Trinket up for after the second wave is because I don't expect to get ganked. And even if we do get ganked, they have such little threat that I really don't care. Hecarim, he's going to be clearing up. He has very low gank threat early on, especially if I just save my Q. Sona, absolutely no gank setup either. So I can be selfless with my Trinket usage in this regard. Okay, final example. Once again, it is one of my games. And in this situation, I think I made an incorrect decision. And so what I did here is I am Pyke, I'm versus Janna. I should have supreme confidence that I'm going to be able to pressure from fog and control and not necessarily need to flush out the enemy support. And so I decide to base, ward mid-bush base for the sweeper. And now I'm not going to have my sweeper up for the first couple waves, which I really want to be able to ensure. And so let's see what happens. Janna is in mid-bush, and I know that they warded because my ward saw that, but even if I didn't ward and didn't have that information, I could infer that information from seeing if they hit me or if minions aggro onto me. And so then I walk forwards, and then they have information of me in this midbush, right? And that's not ideal. I want to ensure that they have as little information to work with as possible here. And we can see that my ward being in this bush is not necessary for me to achieve this type of pressure. And so what I instead should have done is just start sweeper, not necessarily start in lane, but I can leash my Nidalee and then I can come to lane with my sweeper active, get this ward down, and kind of go from there. And there is a little bit more incentive nowadays to start sweeper on engagers since the mid-season update, because it can stack up to 2 charges and your second sweeper is going to be much faster if you just start sweeper as opposed to going trinket to sweeper. I want you guys to actively think about your trinket selection and usage. This is something 100% worth optimizing, and I hope that you enjoyed this different type of content. Thanks for watching. Please consider liking and subscribing if you enjoyed. Big thank you to all of my Patreons over here. I really couldn't do this without you. The links for coaching, for Patreon, for my School of Support Discord server, for socials, they're all going to be linked in the description below. Any and all support is greatly appreciated.